Unveiling the Incredible Secrets of Sumer, 5,000 Years of Transformative Civilization Discovered. Jenna stared at the headline she had crafted with a mix of exhilaration and dread. Her heart raced as she imagined the impact of the discovery she had stumbled upon, a timeline of revolutionary ideas that could change everything not just for her, but for her father's legacy. Each morning, as she navigated the tight spaces of their small kitchen, the aroma of bitter coffee mingling with her father's shallow breathing, her heart ached under the weight of her responsibilities. Thoughts of her underappreciated students danced in her mind, a cacophony of mixed emotions clamoring for attention. Yet here she was, on the brink of uncovering a history that, like her father, felt utterly overlooked. How could she justify pouring her soul into lessons that would never be acknowledged while the pressure of unpaid bills loomed like a thundercloud over her dreams? She fed the fire of ambition while muted dread gnawed at her. This was the dilemma. The desire to teach about Sumer's incredible civilization battled with the necessity of being the dutiful daughter, the responsible caregiver. As the rain pattered against the window, she closed her eyes, her mind racing. Would anyone truly understand the powerful links between her lineage and the relevance of those ancient ideas in today's context? What if her neighbors were right to scoff at her wild ideas? She could almost hear their whispers, why bother with the past when the present demands so much? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The clicking clock felt like a countdown to imminent judgment. She had put months into her research, enlisting the help of a retired archaeologist named Harold who had become an unexpected ally. His eyes lit up with stories of Enki, the Sumerian scholar, pushing Jenna to see the connection between her past and present. But every moment spent in the moldy attic, unraveling forgotten letters, meant another minute away from home, another minute separated from her father. The night before her presentation, every familiar creak of the house echoed like a warning bell in her mind. She rehearsed tirelessly, her voice unwavering, yet inside, despair curled around her heart. The anticipation clawed at her insides as her father's frail figure watched from the recliner, the flickering shadows dancing in the room much like her insecurities. What if the community rejected her ideas? What if Mr. Collins, a steadfast bastion of conventional academia, derailed her findings as frivolous? Doubt and determination warred within her as she stood before the mirror, whispering Enki's revolutionary message: justice must be woven into the very fabric of society. Each repetition fueled her drive, yet it wasn't enough. What mattered most? Remarks from a community that saw her as irresponsible, or the wish to honor her family's legacy? As Jenna braced herself for the presentation, the stakes crystallized before her: uphold her duty as a teacher and a daughter, or stake everything on the message of an ancestor that might never truly see the light of day. Fear thundered through her, a storm brewing, ready to break. As she prepared to leave the house, she glanced back at her father, meeting his gaze heavy with both pride and concern. Would she dare to defy the weight of expectations, or would she let the walls close in around her dreams? The air buzzed with unresolved tension as Jenna stepped into the presentation room, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Rows of indifferent faces stared back at her, a blend of curiosity and skepticism. The scent of stale coffee hung heavily, and the bright fluorescent lights flickered, echoing her uncertainty. Mr. Collins sat front and center, arms crossed, a fortress of academia prepared to critique her every word. She could almost feel the sneers of doubt hanging in the air, the whispers echoing in her mind. What could she possibly share that was worth their time? With a slow, calming breath, she firmly gripped her presentation deck, the papers crinkling under her tension. This wasn't just about Sumer's legacy, this was about her own voice finally breaking free of the expectations that boxed her in. Jenna opened her mouth, words tumbling forth like the rushing waters of the Tigris River. As she spoke of Enki's wisdom and the vital discoveries of ancient Sumer, she watched as some faces shifted, skepticism cracking ever so slightly. Her hands moved animatedly, illustrations of clay tablets and historical reconstructions screenlit behind her visual anchors in this uncertain storm. To her surprise, the hunger for knowledge in the audience flickered into view, intrigued glances exchanged that whispered of possibility. Each mention of justice woven into governance spoke deeply to her present struggles, the blurred lines between responsibility and ambition, past and present. Her voice steadied as she transitioned deeper into her presentation, sharing connections between Sumerian laws and modern-day societal issues. But then there was Mr. Collins, his eyes narrowed as if he were sizing her up, preparing for an intellectual duel. "And what does this have to do with the reality of our current educational system?" he interrupted. The sharpness of his tone cut through the air like a blade, the challenge clear. Undeterred, she leaned into the question, channeling the energy of her ancestors, a fierce determination igniting her core. "Everything, Mr. Collins. Ancient civilizations teach us that true progress requires understanding where we came from. Isn't that the point of education itself to evolve through wisdom of the past?" Each syllable dripped with conviction, surprising even herself. The murmuring crowd settled, eyebrows raised as if questioning their own assumptions about her topic. For a moment, she could see the glimmer of recognition in their eyes, a reflection of her inner battle, the choice to honor her past while forging a new path forward. Afterward, as she stepped down, exhilaration coursed through her veins, mingling with lingering apprehension. She could taste victory, but wasn't ready to swallow it whole just yet. As she mingled among attendees, several colleagues approached, intrigued yet hesitant. Their questions swirled around her. Could this genuine passion yield tangible results? Could these ideas be applied practically, not just in academic theory? It felt like opening a door she had been afraid to touch. Then she felt a tap on her shoulder, the sharp surprise of Mr. Collins cutting through the hopeful chatter. "You made some valid points. However, you must prepare to back them up with more solid evidence if you wish this to go anywhere." His words hung between them, a gauntlet thrown down. Jenna felt the weight of expectation settle back upon her shoulders, a reminder of the path yet to come. As he walked away, she recognized the truth flickering anew in her chest. Mr. Collins was correct, she needed more than just passion. With determination boiling through her veins, she turned her thoughts towards her next steps. She needed to dig deeper, re-examine her findings, and equip herself with undeniable evidence. This was the moment to channel her energy, not just to educate but to inspire true change. As she stood lost in her thoughts, she realized that the journey had only just begun. A subtle smile curled on her lips, history was alive within her, begging for resurrection. Would she be brave enough to uncover more than her own potential? Would she rally her arguments to confront Mr. Collins again? The path ahead shimmered with possibilities, laced with uncertainty. Jenna knew her discoveries had the power to reverberate beyond academic discourse. It would take every ounce of her will to break free from the chains of expectation. Yet, she was ready to embrace the challenge. What lay ahead depended on one thing: how far she was willing to go to honor her father's legacy while crafting her own. And with that thought, a new resolve solidified within her: she would not back down. But the following morning dawned with a fresh uncertainty. The past still held secrets waiting to be unearthed, secrets that might fuel her next venture into history's depths. Would she dare? Jenna awoke with a start, the sunlight streaming through her window illuminating the scattered papers all over her desk. The remnants of her presentation encircled her like fallen leaves beneath a sturdy tree. She knew that today was critical. The responsibility felt heavier than it had the previous evening. The thoughts that had bubbled up during her presentation lingered like the scent of stale coffee from the meeting room. What did progress demand of her, and how could she shape it? She gathered her resources, such as primary texts and scholarly articles, her heart beginning to race all over again as she formulated a plan. Each reference would need to weave into her narrative not just a story but a symphony of evidence supporting her claims. The more she thought about Mr. Collins's challenge, the more it drove her to act. He had been right, and perhaps that realization was liberating. She needed to meet this moment head-on, not only for herself but for those who had entrusted her with their legacies. As Jenna pored over ancient Sumerian texts during the day, her conviction deepened. Absorbing their wisdom, she saw more than just fragments of history. They reflected intricate systems that resonated with contemporary themes of justice, inequality, and governance. It was exhilarating to think she would tap into the transformative power of this knowledge, yet a dreaded answer loomed: did she truly have the ability to enact that transformation? Days turned into weeks, filled with research, late nights, and endless contemplation. Jenna began to identify previously unnoticed patterns. The ways ancient powers structured their administrative systems reflected her own institutional struggles. This was more than just an academic pursuit, it was her call to action. Every old clay tablet led her further toward understanding the change she wished to cultivate. But introspection revealed unsettling truths about her own fears. Was she only searching for validation, something she had lacked during her upbringing? Was her voice truly her own, or had it been sculpted by the shadows of expectation? Jenna grappled with the duality of needing to honor her past while forging a new identity through her research. Discovery had a price. It would require courage to face both the brilliance and the shadows of her legacy. One evening, as she pored over yet another dense historical context, her phone pinged with a message from a friend. "You in? There's a conference coming up that could be a platform to share your discoveries." The words ignited something in her, a flicker of excitement stirred by the prospect of sharing her work with a wider audience. However, the inner voice of skepticism critiqued her. Could she truly put herself in front of experienced academics again? Would she hold her ground? Visions of Mr. Collins's critical gaze returned to her. She knew he would be there, evaluating every claim. It wasn't merely a confrontation with him, it was a test of her resolve. Jenna had to confront the fear of failure lurking beneath her ambition. She needed the evidence, not just passion. It would evoke her full potential, and she would allow nothing to stand in her way. Choosing to take charge, Jenna carved out time to craft an extensive hypothesis. Each argument became a building block, heightened by realizations about herself woven into the narrative. She would be ready. This was the moment where her struggles could morph into strength, the stage upon which she would reclaim her story, one that blended ancient wisdom with her evolving identity. As she prepared to register for the conference, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation tightened within her. Everything depended on this, and the prevailing question remained: would she finally embrace the chance to share her journey, knowing that her worth evolved alongside the legacies she was striving to honor? In a daring act of commitment, she pressed send on her application, sealing her decision but unleashing an unrelenting tide of anxiety. The following morning, she would step into a new arena. One where she would have to reconcile the two halves of her identity: the student of history and the designer of her narrative. With a heavy heart and burning determination, Jenna faced her reflection in the mirror. She had chosen her path. But what awaited on that stage remained shrouded in uncertainty, a tension sparking with potential conflict. Would the evidence she sought truly speak for her, and would she find the courage to articulate her vision? The shadow of doubt echoed in her mind, but Jenna was ready to confront it. The sun timidly crested the horizon as Jenna prepared to step into the auditorium, her palms slick with sweat. The expanse of the stage loomed before her like a vast sea, ready to swallow or uplift. Each footfall echoed, amplifying the constant drumbeat of her heart. The anticipation was a double-edged sword. It challenged her confidence while simultaneously igniting the spark of her ambitions. As she approached the podium, the audience shifted their attention toward her. She caught sight of Mr. Collins, his stern expression encased in shadows but unmistakably evaluating her every move. Was this to be a place of validation or judgment? The question haunted her, sparking an internal dialogue that consumed her focus at the most pivotal moment. A breath steadied her trembling hands as she began her presentation, grounding herself in the ancient wisdom she had so diligently unearthed. The slides transitioned smoothly, entwined with her voice, echoing the narratives of civilizations long past. Facts morphed into stories, each punctuated with passion that she hoped would resonate. The ancient Sumerians were more than just distant figures, they were reflections of humanity's ongoing struggles, themes of power, justice, and community that she drew parallels to in her own life. Yet, the confidence she aimed to project sometimes slipped. A shaky exhale escaped as she addressed references to modern implications. Doubt whispered insidiously that she could falter at any moment, and she resisted the urge to look at Mr. Collins for reassurance. Instead, she focused on her notes, each one a lifeline to her thoughts, a bulwark against the rising tide of anxiety. With every argument she presented, Jenna unearthed layers of understanding within herself. She divulged not just historical analysis but intertwined facets of her journey, her struggles with identity, the weight of expectations, and her growing advocacy for authenticity amidst the academic fabric. The audience's nodding heads sent currents of optimism her way, reaffirming the resonance of her words. But the creeping thought of rejection, especially from Mr. Collins, continued to gnaw at her resolve. Midway through, she introduced a particular artifact, a clay tablet inscribed with archaic ideas of governance often overlooked. The thought struck her: here she was, invoking the message of a civilization that thrived thousands of years ago while tentatively searching for her own voice. The realization deepened her conviction. This was not just about Sumer, it was about dismantling her own fears, unraveling the complex tapestry of who she was against the backdrop of the legacies she aspired to honor. In that moment, Jenna felt the ground shift beneath her. Perhaps the transformation she sought didn't hinge solely on accolades but bloomed from a willingness to expose her vulnerabilities, to show that her insights were just as relevant now as they had been then. She pictured her younger self, desperately trying to please, meek and quiet. But she was not that person anymore. A surge of determination flickered to life. As she integrated personal anecdotes into her narrative, of Professor S. skepticism, her moments of doubt, the late nights spent in fervent research, Jenna felt the slightest crack in the iron grip of tutelage that she had felt for so long. She was charting her course, not through the voices of others but through her experience, knowledge, and passion. The past no longer dictated her progress, it was her foundation. With the final slide illuminated, she concluded her talk. It was met with a volley of applause that reverberated through her, filling the spaces of her earlier uncertainty. Yet, as she basked in the pride of sharing her journey, the realization hit like frigid water. The questions to come: what would Mr. Collins think? Would her voice resonate in the practical realm she sought to stride into, or would it yield to the rising storm of critique? The tension hung palpably in the air, and as she stepped down from the podium, she couldn't help but whisper within herself. What now? The time for confronting her fears was here, but would she find the strength to navigate the treacherous waters ahead, or would this moment mark another layer of doubt added to her already complex identity? As Jenna descended from the podium, the cacophony of applause began to fade. Each clap felt like a distant echo, a reminder of her recent struggle against self-doubt. She took a slow breath, allowing her thoughts to gather even as her mind raced through a jungle of possibilities. The lingering presence of Mr. Collins loomed like a specter, weighing on her resolve. With every step away from the stage, Jenna confronted the reality of what awaited her. Backstage was quieter, an expanse of dimly lit corridors that somehow felt more labyrinthine than the journey she had just undertaken. She needed clarity, a space to gather her emotions and pivot her focus toward the inquiries that were inevitable. Jenna sought refuge in a small alcove, where the light beyond the auditorium dimmed further. She pulled in a deep breath, her mind replaying the moments of triumph and turmoil she had just lived. The personal anecdotes she had woven into her presentation now resonated with distinct significance. They were not mere embellishments, they were testaments of her resilience, a roadmap of her evolution from a timid scholar to an impassioned voice unearthing brilliance in ancient narratives. The echo of Mr. Collins' questions rippled through her consciousness. Did he, too, see the power behind her story? Or would he reduce her performance to a series of academic benchmarks, dismissing her authenticity in favor of traditional metrics? She could already anticipate that first, menacing question: have you considered all the data, Jenna? Doubt creeping into her thoughts once again, Jenna attempted to quiet it. The applause she had received wasn't entirely washed away by the heavy shadow of critique. There were those who had understood, who had felt the heartbeat of her words. She needed to harness that energy. Then, through the disarray of her thoughts, a glimmer of defiance ignited. Upon reflecting on the significance of the Sumerians, Jenna felt emboldened. They had built their civilization through connectivity and innovation, crafting a legacy that thrived even amidst chaos. Her own journey, she realized, mirrored that resilience. They too had faced critiques and skepticism, yet they persevered. Determined, she drew out her notebook, its pages filled with ideas and reflections that had fueled her presentation. She flipped deftly through the scribbles, compelling notes connecting her findings to her personal aspirations. Growing awareness about governance and community led her to a vital insight: she could redefine her approach toward critique. Instead of viewing it as an adversarial thrust, what if she saw it as an opportunity for growth? As she contemplated this shift, Jenna recognized the tremor of excitement building within her. Seeking input did not need to mean surrendering her voice, it could amplify it. What Mr. Collins saw as weakness could become her launching pad for deeper exploration. This interaction might propel her further along her path rather than knock her off balance. In embracing this, she felt the sting of fear lessen, replaced by a seated notion of possibilities. Gripped by newfound resolve, Jenna exited the alcove with her chin held high. It was time to face the questions and perhaps, even Mr. Collins himself. But would she emerge from this confrontation emboldened, or would the very uncertainties she had fought to quell rush back, seeking to reclaim their grasp? In this moment, uncertainty recharged her ambition, leaving her with a singular pulse: what vital answer awaited just beyond the inquiries? As Jenna stepped back into the bustling corridor, the reality of her upcoming confrontation with Mr. Collins weighed heavily on her mind. Each footfall brought a rush of adrenaline, merging her anxiety with a newfound clarity. She was no longer just a scholar, she was an advocate for her ideas, determined to defend the narrative she had crafted. Approaching the panel area, she noticed colleagues exchanging spirited dialogues, their faces animated by shared passions. Jenna's stomach tightened, a mix of excitement and trepidation. Over time, she had built a compendium of knowledge, yet standing among experts felt like wandering into the lioness' den. She knew that Mr. Collins, the most eminent voice in their field, wasn't merely a critic, he was an institution. Yet, this time could be different. This could be a moment of transformation, not just for her but for the dialogue surrounding the rich tapestry of Sumerian civilization. A thought crystallized: if she embraced Mr. Collins' potential critique, she could turn the exchange into a learning moment, elevating her work rather than diminishing it. Could those in the room not see her drive as a passion for deeper inquiry? Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, Jenna recalled a particular passage from her notes, a reflection on how the Sumerians creatively adapted their governance amidst changing environmental circumstances. It struck her then that adaptability was not merely a trait of a civilization but a necessary attribute for any professional striving for success. With resolve, she stepped forward and entered the panel room, a space that felt charged with expectations. The lead moderator motioned for silence as she took a seat. Jenna glanced around the table at her colleagues, noting the mix of curiosity and skepticism etched on their faces. Mr. Collins initiated the discussion, praising Jenna's presentation, but swiftly followed with his most anticipated question. "Your findings are compelling, Jenna, but have you thoroughly considered the breadth of data available? Your emotional appeal risks overshadowing core scholarly criteria." Instead of cringing, Jenna felt a spark of clarity. "I appreciate your insight, Mr. Collins," she began, her voice steady. "However, I believe that history is not merely told through data, it's experienced through narratives that resonate on a human level. The Sumerians thrived because they learned to engage with their environment, adapting their governance to ensure survival. Aren't we, as scholars, similarly responsible for adapting our approaches to modern interpretations?" The air thickened with contemplation. Collagen, visibly intrigued, nodded ever so slightly. As Jenna continued, articulating her thoughts with a newfound agility, she discovered a rhythm between assertion and reflection. Rather than feeling cornered, she asserted her points with vigor, inviting dialogue rather than evading critique. With every word, she felt threads of confidence weaving seamlessly into the fabric of the discussion. The initial apprehension that had floated in her mind dissipated, revealing a stronger version of herself, one who could navigate academic waters with grace and tenacity. Jenna's assertiveness extended one vital question back to the panel: how do we decide what is considered valuable in our interpretations? Shouldn't it be enriched by both quantitative and qualitative narratives? Isn't it time we let diverse voices breathe life into data? Mr. Collins leaned forward, visibly re-evaluating her perspective. She had ignited a dialogue, inviting collaboration rather than defensiveness. As the discussion unfolded, Jenna realized this was more than a mere Q&A session, it was the start of a meaningful exchange. She saw glimmers of acknowledgement from her peers, their expressions transforming. But as she basked in a moment of shared understanding, Jenna felt a nagging certainty that some resistance remained. What if Mr. Collins would never fully embrace her position? What awaited her after this exchange could still unfold in unexpected ways, and beneath the surface, the reality of established norms tugged at her ambition. Could she truly navigate this new territory without losing herself? The stakes had risen, and Jenna stood at the precipice of a critical juncture: breakthrough or setback. What prices would she pay to alter perceptions in her field? And how far was she willing to push against the tide to secure her voice alongside the giants of academia? The applause reverberated through the room, granting Jenna a brief reprieve from the crescendo of her thoughts. She noted the surprised expressions on her colleagues' faces, but her relief was short-lived. The moment Mr. Collins stood to speak, assurance radiated from his posture, even as he pondered his words. "Your approach is refreshing, Jenna," he acknowledged, his tone steady, but changing entrenched viewpoints is no small feat. As he continued discussing her presented ideas, she felt the subtle weight of his legacy bearing down on her. Daring to stand in the shadow of such an authority exposed a vulnerability she'd kept hidden. What if he merely tolerated her perspective? What if, beneath the surface, this was just an academic rite where she would eventually be subjugated to the same old frameworks she sought to challenge? Jenna recognized the latent skepticism among her peers. Even their nodding heads betrayed uncertainty. They were cautious, perhaps fixated on the implications her arguments presented for their established understandings. A clash of ideologies threatened to flare, and with every regained breath, the stakes felt decidedly higher. She needed her next words to be deliberate, impactful. A spark ignited her imagination. This wasn't just about academia. This was a moment of vulnerability and courage, one worth seizing fiercely. Should she approach the opportunities at hand like the Sumerians addressed their challenges? The concept of adaptation still gripped her thoughts. Summoning all her composure, Jenna leaned forward. "I've gleaned that the Sumerians were not afraid to question the status quo. They challenged their vulnerabilities head-on, understanding that to thrive, they had to adapt their governance based on their changing environment. Why should our scholarly expectations differ?" Her voice sharpened, crisp and confident. "Aren't we demanding a sort of evolution in academia that mirrors the very narratives we study? Not only should we embrace divergent voices, but we should also be willing to reframe our methodologies to reflect those complexities." The room shifted slightly, her words emitted waves that rippled through the seated scholars. Yet, the tension lingered, palpable in the air. If this wasn't merely a presentation but a formative dialogue, could she harness this atmosphere to elicit stronger consensus? Despite the honor of Mr. Collins' initial response, Jenna couldn't ignore how the tightness in her chest thickened. Resistance, she sensed, loomed like an ominous cloud, ready to unleash torrents of skepticism. Would she always be engaging with an opposing force? This realization prickled at her resolve, serving as both a warning and a challenge. Suddenly, she recalled the most treacherous tales of history, the civilizations that resisted change, ultimately falling into irrelevance. Would she allow her voice to become a casualty of similar stubbornness, or would she orient her mission to advocate for a more interdisciplinary approach? As discussions churned around her, Jenna locked eyes with Mr. Collins again. His brow furrowed in thought, lips pressed into a thin line as if she had reignited a vital conversation within him. Encouraging those beneath rigid structures to embrace fluidity was the transformation she sought, not just for her ideas, but for the entire discourse of her field. Just then, a lingering doubt whispered in the back of her mind: if she pressed too hard, could this moment backfire? If she pushed for her vision without full consensus, might she isolate herself within the very community she aimed to inspire? Taking a deep breath, Jenna felt a flicker of determination course through her. This was not merely an academic endeavor but a deeply personal quest. At that very moment, she realized the choice ahead lay squarely with her. Would she retreat and blend into the backdrop, or risk the collision with powerful voices to advance her narrative? The decision loomed like a specter. What would she sacrifice to carve out her distinct path, and could she wield her insights effectively enough to foster not only her growth but that of others as well? What was the next step for Jenna when she knew the cost of change could be alarmingly high? Jenna sat through the ensuing discussion but found it increasingly difficult to focus. Mr. Collins' earlier acknowledgement felt like a double-edged sword. The validation she craved sharpened her awareness of the stakes involved. Each passing moment magnified her uncertainty, drawing her into deeper layers of introspection. Should she continue to engage or retreat to preserve her standing? One colleague, Dr. Miller, leaned forward, brow arched, echoing Jenna's earlier thoughts. But how do we ensure we don't compromise our rigorous standards in the pursuit of this so-called evolution? His voice sliced through the room's charged atmosphere, drawing immediate agreement from others. It was the very skepticism Jenna feared, crackling like static electricity. How to reclaim the narrative that was quickly being seized from her? Jenna's mind raced back to the Sumerians' fabled innovators who didn't merely adapt, they revolutionized their society through unyielding resilience. Could she channel that same fervor? It's about integrating our established frameworks with openness towards new ideas, Jenna interjected, her tone steadier than before. We're on the precipice of richer, more nuanced discourse. Rather than viewing this as dilution of rigor, we should see it as strengthening our methodologies. The murmurs of approval from a handful of peers buoyed her spirits. Still, the opposition remained palpable. Dr. Miller's expression indicated he wasn't easily convinced, and she realized that an intellectual challenge lay ahead. This moment wasn't just critical from an academic standpoint, it was about asserting her place and voice among seasoned professionals. She mustered her courage, shifting her gaze back to Mr. Collins, seeking a flicker of acknowledgement or encouragement. It was a silent challenge she posed to him and to herself. The weight of the collective gaze morphed into a tangible force, feeding both her nerves and her resolve. I urge you to consider, Jenna continued, her heart thumping, that our field must not only reflect historical narratives but also adapt to incorporate multidisciplinary perspectives to remain relevant in today's society. But even as she spoke, a gnawing worry resurfaced. Would they view her efforts as an appeal for acceptance or a mere act of defiance? Navigating this precarious tightrope would require finesse. Her instinct urged her to confront those challenges, a bold move that could define the trajectory of her career. As the discussion progressed, Jenna noticed more allies appearing on the dais, nodding and echoing sentiments of interdependence. Could she galvanize this support? Or was she merely momentarily buoyed by a fleeting sense of partnership? The conversation shifted, and wordy defenses regarding established norms spiraled on the cusp of exhausting the discussion. It was time to make a strategic move, one that could either solidify her standpoint or pit her further against the opposition. Clearing her throat, she orchestrated a pause. What about creating workshops that foster this interdisciplinary dialogue? The suggestion fell into the soft silence that followed. If we can bring everyone to the same table, those who fear losing their rigor and those who champion new approaches, and find common ground, we might be laying the foundation for genuine evolution. Some brows furrowed deeper, yet one single nod from Dr. Patel ignited her hope. It was a subtle act, but in that moment, it felt like a part of the academia iceberg had shifted. If she could rally her colleagues to come together rather than push against each other, maybe they'd embrace the modern evolution she desperately sought. But then again, would the skeletons of their long-held beliefs truly allow for such a partnership? The uncertainty loomed heavy, every step forward might sow discord. And yet, the thrill of possibility danced just out of reach, beckoning her forward. With this bold suggestion, Jenna realized the next chapter wasn't just an exploration of ideas, it was a call to action she had to embody, a defining moment that demanded all of her courage and innovation. The weight of leadership began to rest squarely on her shoulders. Would she be able to construct a bridge over the chasm of skepticism, or would her aspirations encounter insurmountable resistance? In that moment, she understood this was no mere presentation, it was her battleground. The next meeting loomed ahead like a tempest. With her resolve crystallizing, Jenna had to confront the reality that change bears a cost. But what price was she truly willing to pay for transformation? Jenna spent the days leading up to the next meeting consumed by anticipation and self-reflection. The prospect of those workshops lingered in her mind like a melody begging for resolution. The rush of hope she felt after Dr. Patel's nod now mingled with the cold grip of doubt, creating a tumultuous internal landscape. Each time she considered the implications of her bold proposal, she felt the weight of possible failure crashing down like a tidal wave. Seated at her desk, she drafted her presentation, struggling to find the right words that would not only convey her ideas but also resonate deeply with her colleagues. Would this evoke a sense of unity or merely exacerbate the existing divisions? It was hard to shake the idea that her very career might be hanging in the balance. This was not just about being seen as credible, it was about pioneering a transformation that could redefine the field itself. The night before the meeting, she found herself awake, rehearsing her points in front of the moth-eaten mirror in her bedroom. "We have the chance to weave together old traditions and fresh perspectives," she murmured to her reflection, searching for a spark of conviction in her weary gaze. "It's crucial, not just for us, but for the generations to come." Each repetition of her words echoed, fostering a growing determination that began to overshadow her lingering fears. Arriving at the conference room the next morning felt surreal. The atmosphere crackled with tension, a palpable reminder that the stakes had been raised. Colleagues shuffled in, their whispers dappled with skepticism and curiosity. Jenna took a breath, anchoring herself in the convoluted reality she had chosen to confront. She reminded herself that evolution seldom occurs without friction. As Mr. Collins called the meeting to order, Jenna sat tall, her spine a firm column of resolve. She felt ready, yet vulnerable, exposed at the helm of this intellectual ship. There was no turning back. She had dared to open this door, now, she had to stride through it with conviction. "Thank you all for gathering today," Jenna began, her voice steady despite the tempest brewing within. "I appreciate the concern surrounding our evolving landscape and the desire to uphold our chosen rigor. However, I propose that we have a unique opportunity here, a chance to engage with interdisciplinary dialogue in ways that not only preserve our foundations but invigorate them." She glanced around the room, gauging their reactions. A few brows furrowed slightly, but as she progressed, she noticed a change. Eyes began to brighten and nods of cautious interest starting to emerge from the shadows of skepticism. Creating workshops could provide a platform where we discuss our differing viewpoints and concerns openly, allowing those who cling to established norms to express their fears while enabling others to champion creative approaches. As she spoke, she infused her words with passion, drawing from the well of knowledge and clarity she had nurtured during this journey. The meeting continued, and with every response, Jenna could feel the pendulum of doubt beginning to swing toward affirmation. Yet, beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension simmered. Dr. Miller's opposition remained sharp, his gaze unwavering. "But how can we trust that this will not dilute our focus?" he challenged, his voice cutting through her burgeoning momentum. Jenna felt her heart race, but she steadied herself. This was a pivotal moment, one that could either shatter her initiative or set the course for its growth. "Trust is built, not given," she replied, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "We have to engage not just in discussion but in active collaboration. We can set the standards ourselves, ensuring that nothing valuable is lost in this process." A heavy silence followed her declaration, crescendoing as every eye turned to Dr. Miller. Jenna felt the weight of anticipation. The room had become a battleground where ideas clashed, but also where bridges could potentially be forged. The moment became a crucible for Jenna. Would she cower before the impending confrontation, or would she stand strong, ready to face the questioning and confront her antagonist? With a rising tide of determination, she recognized that this meeting was just the beginning. The journey ahead could demand everything from her resilience, creativity, and perhaps most importantly, courage. But was she truly prepared for the intense backlash that loomed just beyond the horizon if her vision did not align with her peers? As the air thickened with uncertainty, Jenna realized that the stakes were about to reach a boiling point. The hourglass of opportunity was slipping, transformation awaited. She took a deep breath, steadying her pulse. The time had come to face the music, and she was determined to conduct the symphony, regardless of how fraught the performance might be. Jenna stood resolute at the precipice of her academic journey, the weight of her aspirations colliding with the fervent voices of her peers. The meeting room buzzed with intensity, skepticism still crackling in the air, yet she felt the embers of determination smoldering within her. It was time to forge ahead and demonstrate that evolution required more than mere acceptance of new ideas. It necessitated proactive engagement and collaboration. As she elaborated on her proposed workshops, Jenna carefully intertwined her past revelations with future ambitions, echoing the wisdom of ancient systems that thrived on adaptation and community. "This is more than just a venture into academia," Jenna asserted, her voice gaining strength. "This is about cultivating an inclusive environment that champions diverse perspectives while honoring the foundational rigor that sustains our discipline. In the spirit of the Sumerians, we must weave our legacies into something greater." She scanned the room, determination fueling her resolve. Dr. Collins leaned forward, his brow furrowed but his expression transformed from skepticism to intrigue. Dr. Miller, however, maintained his resolute stance, countering, "But what metrics will we use to assess success? Will we sacrifice quality for the sake of breadth?" Jenna steeled herself, recognizing this as a pivotal moment, a chance to illustrate the validity of her vision. "Quality and breadth are not mutually exclusive," she countered calmly. "We can draft a framework to evaluate contributions, ensuring that all voices are heard while maintaining our standards. Just like the Sumerians who innovatively structured their society to meet environmental demands, we too can adapt our scholarly methodologies to reflect the complexities of modern discourse." The rhythmic pulse of conversation reshaped its timbre, colleagues exchanging nods of uncertainty and acceptance. This moment of uneasy receptivity ignited a flicker of excitement within Jenna. It felt as if the shadows of doubt were now being chased away by a light of promise, a light that wove through centuries, binding the past with the present. Then it happened. Dr. Collins raised his hand, a sign of authority that silenced the lingering whispers. "Jenna, your passionate approach is commendable," he began, his tone now softer, yet rich with gravitas. "What you're suggesting has potential. We could set a precedent that enhances our field. If you're willing, I propose we establish a committee to further explore the parameters of these workshops, combining both our rigor and openness." Her heart soared. "Yes. I would be honored to spearhead the initiative," she declared, the fervor of her response echoing her commitment. A collective wave of approval washed over the room, faces softening into expressions of budding collaboration. This was not just a discussion of ideas, it was a renaissance, an alignment of minds invigorated by potential. As the meeting concluded, Jenna stepped back into the corridor feeling light, liberated from the chains of self-doubt that had bound her for so long. Her initial apprehensions had transformed, now powering her forward with newfound clarity. She had not only staked her claim but fostered a pioneering pathway, breathing life into the nuances of her vision. The once looming specter of Mr. Collins shifted now to a powerful ally, committed to unraveling rigidity in favor of innovation. Days later, the first planning session for the workshops unfolded around a table bustling with colleagues from various disciplines. Enthusiasm resonated through discussions as they brainstormed angles of historical narratives while intricately integrating compelling contemporary issues. Jenna felt a deep sense of connection, realizing that by honoring the past, they could illuminate their shared future. But perhaps the most profound change lay within Jenna herself. Facing her fears had carved out a new identity, one that radiated confidence and purpose. She stood as an architect of collaborative change, ready to inspire others to elevate conversations beyond traditional confines. Jenna had gone from an uncertain educator thrumming at the edges of legacy to a visionary who demonstrated that ancient wisdom still mattered. By intertwining her lineage with newfound identity, she transformed her father's legacy into her own. As she gazed out at the faces eager to explore new understandings, Jenna understood she had truly achieved something monumental, not just professionally, but personally. This was her moment, a reflection of ambition carved through resilience. The echoes of Sumer were not merely remnants of history, they were the vibrant threads weaving together a narrative of innovation and courage. Together, we will explore the past to transform the future, she affirmed, and in that declaration, she felt an unexpected peace. This was her path, authentically and unapologetically hers. Now, it was your turn to embrace the journey. If you found inspiration in Jenna's transformation, you need to subscribe now to never miss another exclusive emotional story. Leave a like now to boost our reach and share these powerful narratives. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jenna's journey, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to transform someone's day.